What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 625. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, fresh off of a holiday feast, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how was Thanksgiving?
It was awesome. We got to see, our friends. They came over. We do a Friendsgiving every year here in Denver because basically all of us from Denver are kind of transplants. Like we all moved here. In fact, mostly because of me.
Yes, that's very true.
For various employment opportunities and whatnot. And so we end up having an awesome group of friends here. And no one has family here. And most people, when they decide between Thanksgiving and Christmas, they'll go home for Christmas. It's even a little more complicated now. Some folks aren't really even interested in traveling, and all that. So
right.
We end up having basically everyone kind of come over, and we did it potluck style and had a great spread. A lot of fun. It was a great kind of little holiday, and I'm just up from a nap as a result of such things, of course.
Yes. The recovery process is in effect. Yeah, I was in the car most of the day. I went up to my mom's, which is about an hour north of me, and then down to my aunt's, which is about an hour south. So I spent a good chunk of time in the car, but of course, it's always good to be around family. Happy Thanksgiving to all of our U.S.-based listeners and everybody else outside. Hopefully you have a great weekend too. Okay, so This episode of the show, we're going to be talking about a bunch of Crimson Vow stuff. We're going to talk about the LOL Showdown that we did a couple days ago. We're going to talk about maybe some fresh takes on the format. We've been doing some thinking and some playing and have kind of come to some different conclusions. And we'll even be doing the top 5 commons, at least as of now, for each of the colors in Crimson Vow. Before we get into that, let's mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check out Channel Fireball this weekend. They've got this big Black Friday thing going on over at CFB. And as of recording today, you get 20% store credit back on all orders. But that lasts for a very limited window, so you're going to have to be listening to this nearly live, I think, to actually hit it. But at any rate, as the holidays get into full swing, if you've got a Magic player in your life, or maybe you've got a little extra holiday money in your pocket, channelfireball.com is the place to go to really get anything you need. As you may know, earlier this year, they switched over to a marketplace style where they actually are kind of an aggregator for a whole bunch of different shops that sell singles. And that lets you have a bigger selection, and you can kind of get really nitty gritty about what condition you want, what price you want to pay, that kind of stuff. And they make it easy. One stop over at channelfireball.com. If you do end up getting anything over at CFB, if you'd use the affiliate code LR, I'd appreciate it. It lets them know that we sent you over, helps out the show. And I do thank you for doing so. The show's also brought to you by FTX. That's right. They are the place to go for all of your digital assets. You might be asking yourself, well, why do I need digital assets? Well, the truth is you don't, at least not right now. But there are a lot of reasons to get into this space going forward. And if you're interested in learning about it, checking it out, and maybe even doing some investing, FTX is a great place to go. They're regulated, and so that you know that they're safe. If you're in the US, it's ftx.us, and outside is ftx.com. And you can learn about cryptocurrencies. You can learn about NFTs and blockchain technology and kind of where that whole thing is going. It's still in its relatively early stages, and it can be a bit of a bumpy ride. So if you do decide you want to invest, make sure that you consult an investment professional first. That's just good advice for any type of investment you're going to do. But once you're ready, make sure you head over to FTX if you decide to do so. The show's also brought to you, of course, by the Patreon. That's patreon.com/limited resources. Everybody who signs up on the Patreon gets a thank you card and an LR sticker in the mail. And we really appreciate everybody supporting us. That is the bedrock of our podcast, and it's the reason that it's still around, to be honest. One of the cool options, or one of the bonuses, I should say, that you get for being a patron, there's actually quite a few, but one of the main ones is you get access to the Patreon feed. That's for every level of patron, and that's where we post things like our Patreon question of the week threads. And we've got a Patreon question of the week here from Corey, who says, "Hey, LR team, love the show as always. It's a must watch and required reading even through a 16-hour workday job on a cruise ship." Wow, Corey, that's an intense job. That's cool that you carve out some time for Luis and I. My question is inspired by the return of MTG events with the Las Vegas event on the weekend. Other than the limited main event, what is your favorite things to do at events like GPs? Do you have any fun stories like gambling for $100 on coin flips outside a karaoke bar after scrubbing out, which totally did not happen to me, he says. Love the show. That's a pretty good one. And by the way, Luis, that does remind me, I want to talk about my experience at MTG Las Vegas on the weekend as well. So we'll do that after this. Boy, I figure you got to be the king of this, Luis. Like, what kind of nonsense did you get up to? Coin flipping for money seems to be on the low end of the scale for what you guys have done.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on where you are, how people did in the tournament, because that can definitely affect your like mood or energy level. In some cases, if you do poorly, it makes you want to go harder. In some cases, if you do well, it makes you want to celebrate. So I guess in both cases, yeah. I mean, you know, I certainly do enjoy a good gamble. And when I was in Vegas, the former CFB editor, Andy, he's actually quite the gambler himself. And me and him played a lot of blackjack the last couple of times we were in Vegas. And that was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
So
I was getting a lot of messages about the ups and downs of playing late night blackjack with Andy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, it was great. And then actually, I remember when we went out with some friends, we had some folks who wanted to gamble, but like didn't want to basically like lose money or like didn't have the, you know, funds to lose. So what I did is I staked a few people where they basically just got to gamble with my money and then give me what they won, or if I lost, you know, so be it. No, that I don't mind. That was fun.
That's quite a sweat. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I know money drafting was a big part of the equation for you guys for a long time.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I got into the Pro Tour scene. And, you know, we were just talking about this with regards to the Showdown, which we're going to get into in a little bit. A lot of the reason that I ended up, you know, kind of learning about Limited, or how I ended up learning about Limited, was through money drafts, which are typically 3-on-3s, just like the Showdown, for, you know, various sums of money. Sometimes you just play for the pack. Sometimes you play for $20 or $50. The most I've ever played for is like $1,000. But that's very atypical. You don't usually do that. Like, that, you know, those were, you know, kind of extenuating circumstances. But well, what happened was we were in LA and playing with some guys who played poker, and they played poker and Magic, but they were definitely poker players. Yeah. And they just loved to gamble. And they're like, let's just money draft for like this, you know, these absurd sums. And we're like, are you sure? Like, we're professional Magic players and you guys aren't. And they're like, no, it's okay. We want to do it. So we did it partially because it's like, I mean, it was a good deal. We won. Like, yeah. But not every time, you know. And there were some times when they walked away with quite a bit more. But I don't know. I miss all that stuff. That's not really how the scene has been, even as live Magic isn't happening right now. I mean, you've been around the last like 4 or 5 years of the PT, as everyone got older and didn't want to stay up till 2 a.m, didn't want to irresponsibly gamble a bunch of money. That was that kind of aspect had faded to a pretty large degree.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of random. I mean, usually I'll say that, you know, most of the fun stories or the interesting stuff that happens around these type of events revolve around food, right? It's usually like somebody has a reservation at some restaurant that's hard to get into, or there's a restaurant, you know, oh, they got the best fried chicken or the best barbecue or the best burger or whatever. And we got to go find it. We got to go wait in line and get a group. And, you know, and it all, the whole night kind of revolves around that. And those are, I mean, honestly, those are the best times of the whole thing. Right. Like,
well, that's kind of what we transitioned into to a degree. Was we would focus more, and not only on food, but food was a big part of it, of the, what does the city have to offer? You know, and I got a lot better in the like later stages of my career, as it were, about like, let's make sure to go to the cool museum that's in this place, or let's go to the restaurant it's famous for, because at some point I realized like, hey, I'm not going to be in some of these places ever again, or, you know, I should take advantage of the fact that I'm getting to travel here, and ended up, you know, having a lot of fun by really kind of making use of the fact that Magic was subsidizing our trips to wherever it is we were at. And of course, that reminds me of when we went to Hattie B's, the best fried chicken place in Nashville. And Marshall's like, I got this, get whatever you want. So, and we were at the counter, at the cash register. I'm like, all right, well, cool. So I got this chicken meal, but also take that t-shirt.
Yeah, it was like, I didn't even notice. And I got up and they're like, okay, it's like $55. I'm like, what? Like, what the hell did we got two chicken tender meals or something. Like, how did this? And then Luis is holding a t-shirt. The good news is you wore that. Like, you wore it for a while. Like, that was not just to troll me. Like, it got some use.
No, I love the Hattie B's t-shirt, and it was a good conversation piece. When I wore it in random cities, people would frequently come up to me and be like, "Oh man, I love Hattie B's. It's a pretty famous place for good reason."
It is. In fact, I had it in Vegas on the weekend. Let's do a couple of crack-a-packs, Luis, and then we'll get into. I'll talk about my Vegas trip. We'll talk about the showdown, and then we'll get into some of the Crimson Vow stuff that I mentioned before. So first crack-a-pack. Let's take a look at what we've got here. Okay, so we've got our first common is Weary Prisoner. That's the 3 in a red 2/6 defender. With Daybound, it becomes a 6/6 that has to attack.
I have yet to put this card in my deck.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad.
It's just not great.
It's not good. It's actually totally fine on rate, right? Like a 2/6 for 4 mana, even if it can't attack right away, is already like, hey, that's a good blocker, right? But the problem is that, like, what do you want? Do you want a really good blocker? Because that's fine. But then it switches to, I guess you would say, a very good attacker. You've only sunk 4 mana into it, and it's a 6/6, but it must attack. So it's like, well, it'd be really nice if my creature could kind of obey whether I wanted to be on the attacks or on the defense, like all other creatures do. And this one just jumps into the red zone when you don't want it to, and can't attack, when you do need it to a lot of times. You're just much better off with other 4-drops in that deck. Piercing Light. This is the white instant. It does 2 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. And there's also an important footnote. You do get to scry one as well.
I haven't really been impressed with Piercing Light. It's fine. If you need cheap cards, it's an okay card to put in your deck because it does interact and kind of affect the board. But for the most part, I would say that Piercing Light's not a card I'm striving to play. Yeah,
we often talk about these cards kind of in terms of like this is a removal spell, right? And so there's like kind of top tier removal, at the common level, and then there's kind of the second tier, and this is like second tier minus. Like this one's trending away, from that. Dreadlight Monstrosity. This is 4 blue, 5/5 with Ward 2. And you can pay 3 blue to make it unblockable until end of turn, but you can only do it if you own a card in exile, strangely. Card was a little more relevant for sealed when I was playing, but even then it's fringe.
Yeah, it's just really expensive. The Ward 2 is nice. It does prevent some of the removal from hitting it right away, though obviously at 6, they can still probably kill it. But again, this is a card that you preferably aren't playing in your deck. There's just a lot of things to do, before then, and it's just not the best high end.
That's right. Apprentice Sharpshooter, 2 in a green, 1/4 reach with training. Meh.
I like this well enough. It's got this weird tension where training's good in aggressive decks, or tries to be good in aggressive decks. The training I've found to not be great, and a 1/4 reach as a defender. Where I like this is in like red green, because that deck can be a little bit slower and have some vulnerability to flyers. I don't like it that much in white green.
Yeah, it's just not aggressive enough. Persistent Specimen. This is the black 1/1, and you can pay 2 and a black to remove or to return it to from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
This is kind of like a casualty of the exploit deck not being great. So I would say that, you should, again, try not to have this one in your deck. The other exploit enablers like Wretched Throng and Doom Dissenter, I think, are a little bit better. So
yeah, they just keep a better board presence, especially the Dissenter, right? Ugh, this stupid card. Cradle of Safety, 1 in a blue enchantment aura. It's flash, an enchant creature you control. It gets hexproof until end of turn, and then +1/+1 as well.
I like this if you're aggressive. If you can consistently pressure your opponent, what will happen is for this card to be good, you want to like have a board presence, and untap with like you being ahead on board, so that you can leave mana up, and then they're forced at some point to interact with you, and you cast this and blow them out.
Right.
Which actually happened to you in the showdown.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Now that you mention it.
Yeah, Lord Tupperware got you pretty good with the Cradle, but
he did.
Not a card I'm going to first pick, but it's a card I don't mind playing in like the Blue-White Flyers deck, especially since that deck also picks up a little extra value by just having enchantments. It just cares about enchantments with a couple cards.
Yeah, and the point of these type of cards is that you don't have to take them early, but if they happen to fit your deck just right, you can run one of them. And the Festivities, this is the red sorcery that does 1 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control. Sorcery.
Yeah, it's a sideboard card, and even then, not a very good one.
Yeah, it does have a major effect in the right matchup, but yeah, you just have to sideboard it. Hungry Ridge Wolf. I've actually liked this one. 1 in a red 2/2 wolf, and if you control another wolf or werewolf, it gets +1/+0 and trample.
Yeah, this is a really good card when you have like 4 or 5 other wolves, ideally more, because a 3/2 trample is just going to trade nicely regardless, and it still is a good 2-drop even if you don't always have a wolf, your opponent's going to have to do something about it. And
right.
Yeah, I think that the Ridge Wolf, again, not a card I'm like snapping up early, but great in red green, and then playable in really any red combination that has a sufficient amount of wolves, which red based decks. Sometimes you end up in like red black, but have like 4 or 5 wolves, and that's okay too.
Belligerent Guest is next. This is I heard you like 3/2 tramples. This is a 2 in a red for a 3/2 trample, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get a blood token.
Yeah, this is, like you said, of tier 2 cards, this is like a pretty firmly like tier 2.5 card where I'll play this if I need another creature, fill in a point in the curve, especially in a deck that cares about blood, but it's not a card I prioritize and not a card I really ever feel bad if I don't run.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think this is a really good poster child for what we've talked about a lot, where, the gap in power level between what we would consider fringe playable or, air quotes unplayable, and between that and the cards that we actually kind of want to have in our deck is really just narrow, right? I mean, look at this card, right? It's 3 mana, 2/3 trample with an upside. Like, it's totally fine.
3/2, yeah.
Yeah. Or sorry, 3/2. Yeah. Totally fine card, right? Like, there's not a lot to hate about this card. But at the same time, our standards are very high these days. Last common is Nurturing Presence. This is the 1 in a white that, gives your creature the ability that when another creature enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and you get a 1/1 white spirit creature token when this thing ETBs. So you kind of get spotted a 1/1, and then it makes your creature a little better too, and of course it gets pumped up as well.
This card's impressed me.
It's not a little better than it looked, isn't it?
Yes, it's not to say that it's good. I still think it's mediocre, but it is better than unplayable for sure. And
definitely
in the blue-white decks where you can put this on a flyer. And again, you care about having spirits, you care about enchantments. It's good with like the Heron Blessed Geist or whatever to 5 mana 3/3, and it just has just enough there to get it across the finish line in blue white specifically.
It really does. Yeah, you can put it in that deck and it actually performs. I wouldn't run too many of them, but it's pretty good. Okay, uncommons. First one out, Luis. It's our favorite. It's Boarded Window.
There we go. Yeah,
the word was out apparently.
One of the worst cards in the set, and this is funny because this shows you kind of a little like you might think a card is good, play it, maybe even have a good experience or two, but to some degree you do have to trust the data. Like when our first take on the card was like, hey, this card is kind of narrow, but this could be good in the right matchups or whatever. I just don't think that's true anymore. It's just got such a low win rate, and my experience
I'll look it up real quick, but it's extremely low. Boarded Window of cards that have a sample. So there's 3 cards that just haven't been played enough to even count, but above those, this is the third from the bottom.
Yeah. And
it's got a 43.5% win rate on 17 lands. And remember, that's adjusting for the fact that 17 lands player win on average at like a 54% clip. So this is abysmal.
So I think as 17 lands user base gets bigger, that number's going down.
I don't know what it is, but that's what
I'm
it
not
was
sure
last time.
If it has
talked
yet,
to Sirkovitz, it should go down.
But
over time.
I suspect that long term, it would be great if it was like 50%, because that would mean enough people are using it that it just gets players from all parts of the spectrum. But
right.
Yeah, Boarded Window is not good, and I think even people who initially liked it, Lords of Limited, which to be fair, we also initially liked it. So
I did too.
I'm not actually calling them out. It is funny that they had to concede in the face of data, and even when they maybe had some good experiences with the card, we're like, no one ever wins with this card. Maybe this card is bad. And then you start looking at it closer and you try it one more time and you're like, okay, yeah, this card's just not where it's at.
Right. It's so brutal that it goes away. Like if they just get the one good hit in, then it's gone. Lantern of the Lost, 1 mana artifact, uncommon. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card from a graveyard. You can pay 1 tap and exile it to exile all cards from all graveyards and draw a card. I haven't even brought this in out of the board.
Yeah, no, it's just the graveyard is just not that big of a zone that you interact with. Yeah,
the lack of flashback in this set really does change that. You're just not taking spells out of people's graveyards as often as in mid. Next is Lam Holt Recontour. This is a 3 and a red 2/4. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's on Daybound. On night side, it's a 4/4 that does 2 damage instead of 1.
I like this card a lot. Initially, it was like, well, this card could be good in, like the red blue spells deck. I think it's just a good card because, first of all, it can often flip and you end up as a 4 mana 4/4, which obviously is fine. Okay. But then once you're at 2 damage per spells, how many spells do you need to cast before this card has kind of gotten your value? And the answer is like 1, maybe 2.
Yeah, 1 or 2. Yeah, 2 for sure, right? Like if you've done 4 extra damage, like that's just a ton.
Yeah, and it's not hard to do that because even decks that aren't a spell deck have 7, 8 spells. It's just kind of hard to end up with too many less than that.
Right, and this is very forgiving, right? It's non-creature spell. We're not talking about instants and sorceries here. So, you throw out an artifact and it'll trigger it. So, yeah, I like this card too. In fact, this would be my pick. This pack has been awful.
This pack's awful, but yes, I would be on the Recontour as well.
Our rare is called Graf Reaver. It's the 1 and a black 3/3 zombie warrior with exploit. Whenever it exploits a creature, you destroy a planeswalker. And at the beginning of your upkeep, it does 1 damage to you.
I have been really unimpressed with Graf Reaver. Same. I wonder if, in general, you would be better replacing a Graf Reaver in your deck with basically any other card.
Yeah, any card of equivalent cost, right? Just throw something else in, and I would say, I would think any card. You mean like a basic planes or
probably any spell, any card that's playable. Like, I would rather just have kind of a random mediocre card over Graf Reaver. I just think unless you're extremely aggressive, this is just a card that is likely to be worse for you than good for you because you'll play it and then it'll just force you into a position where you either have to be racing or make bad trades with it. Otherwise, you just die to the ability.
Yeah. Yeah, it is just too much of a tax to pick. So yeah, I'm taking Lam Holt Recontour.
Yeah, not the first pick we dream of, but fair enough.
Definitely not. All right, let's do another crack a pack since we're still early in the format, relatively speaking, and we'd like to get a few more. So our next one. All right, we're already starting off better here, Luis. Our first one out is Hookhand Mariner. That's the 3 and a green 4/4, and if it gets to Nightbound, it becomes a 6/4. Good card.
Yeah, I've been impressed. This is the kind of werewolf they needed in Midnight Hunt to make the werewolves deck, playable. The Mariner that comes out is okay on the front side and actually really good on the back side. A 6/4 that's hard to block is pretty substantial. So
yeah, what is it? It can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less or something.
Yeah, well, they don't have a snappy word for it yet, but that ability makes it really hard for them to double block. It also kind of makes it so that sometimes they just can't block it at all, and it makes combat tricks even more savage because they'll have to put a good creature in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, so already good right out the gate. Hookhand Mariner. Next is Chill of the Grave. I like this card too. This is 2 and a blue instant that costs 1 less to cast if you control a zombie. It taps a creature. Creature doesn't untap during its next untap step, and you draw a card. I've liked this card quite a bit.
Yeah, it's especially good if you have a decent amount of zombies because going from 3 to 2 mana is a pretty big deal.
It really is. And this does act as, it really does serve the purposes that you need because it gives you the card back. So if you're a controlling deck and you're trying to not die, this does a really good job. I mean, it knocks a creature out for 2 attack steps and it replaces the card for not an insane amount of mana. So it lets you affect the board, even if it is temporary, while also keeping the land drops flowing, getting to the next card, etc. And if you're in the more aggressive decks, like the blue-white one that Luis talked about before, you can run one of these and just tap down their only blocker, their only flyer and slam them for a whole bunch. And sometimes that time frame is the rest of the game, right? Lock down your creature, hit you, and it's okay, well, this is just over now. So yeah, I like Chill of the Grave a lot.
If this was in a different color
over it, but
Yeah, I would take the Mariner over it. If this was if Chill the Grave was in a different color, if it was white or red, I think the card would be like pretty close to busted in terms of just so sick in aggro decks. The thing is, blue is not that well equipped to take advantage of that, so it's still really good in the blue decks. But Chill the Grave, when you have like a board advantage or you're racing, is just really, really savage.
Yeah, this is a good argument for the color pie, by the way, right? Like this is why we have the differentiation between the colors, because you can put a card like this here and not over there. Dawnheart Disciple, 1 and a green, 2/2. Whenever another human ETBs you, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Haven't been super thrilled with this one. You could put it in your deck, but not a big fan.
I think it's good. You really want it in white green is the place to be for the Dawnheart Disciple. So I don't view it as a full gold card, but it's kind of like the Ridgewolf, where like it's a pseudo gold card. So I don't really want to first pick a gold card if I can avoid it, unless the card's really strong. So I would rather take Hookhand Mariner. Though even in like, in something like white green, it's possible that you would want the Disciple depending on how your curve shapes up. You should just first pick Mariner over this card, though.
Would you consider yourself a Mariners fan?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay. Next is Vampire Slayer. This is the 1 and a white 2/2 that has Vampire Death Touch. If it deals damage to a vampire, the vampire dies.
The vampires are good enough in this set in that deck is good enough that this card's gone a little up in my rankings, but
it's still not a card 2-drop, right?
It's still mostly just a curve filling 2-drop. So still in the Mariner here, but really hoping that's not where we end up.
Same. Syncopate is next. X blue instant counter target spell unless they pay X and you exile it if the spell gets countered that way.
This is another kind of symptom of the color balance in the set, because I would prefer to play green over blue in this set. And so even though I think Syncopate and Mariner are basically equivalent in terms of kind of the effect they have on not the effect they have on the game, but just like how good they are. Like I think they're both cards that are like, I don't know, kind of mid-range in terms of power level, where I'm happy to have them in my deck, but not overjoyed. And I would rather just start with a green card given that's the case.
Red, black, white, green, blue.
Yeah,
those are my rankings for right now.
Those are the Mardu colors and then the Civic colors.
Okay, sad. Next is Blood Petal Celebrant. This is the 1 and a red 2/1 that gets first strike as long as it's attacking, and when it dies, you get a blood token. This little card's good. This thing's been doing good work.
Yeah, it is good. It's like I've mentioned before, it's a little bit worse than I thought it was going to be. Like I would have not guessed that Voldaren Epicure would be the card to be taking over this, but I don't even think that's close anymore. Like
which one's that again?
The 1/1 for 1.
Oh, yeah.
I think the 1/1 for 1 is just quite a bit better than the 2/1 for 2.
God, it is kind of better, isn't it? That's weird. Yeah, it just is better.
So there's a couple reasons. One is, I think the main one is it gives you the blood right away. So like if you have a blood crazed socialite or a sanguine statuette, or just need to cycle a card, you get the blood right away, and you don't have to like depend on your opponent to kind of give you that. And then the other is that it just immediately nugs your opponent, and it only costs 1 mana. The difference between 1 and 2 mana is just huge. So I like the Epicure more, though. The Blood Petal Celebrant's good. I think I would take Blood Petal Celebrant over Hookhand Mariner, pick one, pack one.
Yeah, this is close. This is definitely where you're like, yeah, maybe, but I'm really hoping to get something better. Next is Massive Might. This card's gone up a lot for me. Green instant. Actually, after watching you smash people with it a lot, target creature gets +2/+2 and trample. Totally.
This is one we were definitely too low on initially, and I've been impressed with it. The key with Massive Might is that it acts as the 1 mana trick that helps you win a fight pretty well, right? Like that's what it does. You play tricks largely for this, but it's got that second mode of 1 green, deal 5 damage to your opponent when they block your Flourishing Hunter, in a race. And that second mode just kicks this up a notch to being a card that I'm actively happy to have in my deck.
Yeah, it's really important that we have werewolves that get a lot of stats, right? The Hookhand Mariner is a good example, becoming just a huge. It's a 6/4 you've only invested 4 mana into. And that's where there's a lot of targets floating around for Massive Might to be a huge damage hit and to end the game. Interestingly, it's right next to Witch's Web here, which is a lot worse. It's 1 and a green instant target creature gets +3/+3 and reach until end of turn, and you untap it. It's funny because you would think, hey, this is about on par, right? Like, yeah, you're getting, it doesn't get trample and it costs an extra mana, but you get to untap it. So it's much better defensively, and it's +3/+3 rather than +2/+2. So that has some applications, but that just isn't how these cards play out.
Yeah, the difference, like you said, the difference between 1 and 2 mana and the loss of trample means that I think this is just a lot worse.
Right. It also shows, combat tricks are better when you're attacking, right? That's when you want to cast them, is when you force your opponent to block, or if they think they're going to make a trade, and you can punish them by only playing 1 mana, killing their creature, and with Massive Might, even getting in for a couple of points of damage, and then casting another spell that turn. Witch's Web is bad at all of those things, or worse at it than all of those
Definitely
things, and
worse,
that's why it's down. So
I mean, you want to cast a combat trick when they've tapped out for a creature, you attack, they block. They're like, well, we've been in this situation a million times. If they have a combat trick, that's fine. I'll just trade now. It's okay. Yeah. But Massive Might's like, oh, it costs 1, so they still get to play a 3-drop on turn 4 after casting it, and you take an additional 2 damage. And then you also never want to be in the position of, okay, they're attacking me. I cast my untapped combat trick when they have all their mana up.
Oh, God. It makes me just shiver thinking of it. Aim for the Head is next. It's 2 and a black sorcery. Choose 1, exile a zombie, or a target opponent exiles 2 cards from their hand.
Playable card, but not one I'm excited about. For what it's worth, I'm still on the Blood Petal Celebrant over Massive Might, even though Massive Might is good.
And you would take Massive Might over the Mariner?
I would take the Mariner over Massive Might.
I would too. I don't know why though, because Massive Might's definitely.
I think Mariner is just a really solid creature, and one way to look at it is the quality difference between Mariner and kind of like mediocre creature that you have to run instead, I think is likely to be a little bigger than the difference between Massive Might and the last spell you end up cutting, because you have less room in your deck for spells than you do for creatures.
Naval Ghast Beguiler is our last common. It's the 4 and a white 2/5, and it doesn't have flying. And my God, I always think it has flying anyway. And you can pay white, tap it to tap a creature. Is this card just trash?
I think so. It's just way too expensive. Also, like a tapper that's a 2/5 is kind of a waste because you never get to use both the abilities at once.
Right. Like, it's like, I've got this great blocker, and it's like, well, okay, it might as well be a 1/1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Not great there. That moves us to the uncommons. First one is, I haven't even played this card yet. Like blue-green, it just seems so bad. I don't think I've ever lost a game to it. It's Vile Spawn Spider. This is blue-green 2/3 Reach Spider. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you mill a card, and you can pay 2 green-blue and tap it and sacrifice it to create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each creature card in your graveyard, and you can only do this at sorcery speed. When I hear Innistrad, this is where I want to be, but I just couldn't be further from. I've never even played one of these.
I mean, when the set first came out, I drafted a sweet blue-green deck that had 3 of them, and the deck was awesome. Mm-hmm. But then I quickly realized that blue and green are not only the 2 worst colors, but in combination might be the worst archetype, or at least close to it. I don't know what's worse. So, yeah, this is an even more stark example of like, hey, I'd rather take a green card over a blue card. It's like, I just won't take a blue-green card first. I don't think there's one in the set that I would take over, like, I don't know, in a braid or something like that.
And you'd think that this would be it if there was one. Okay, this next card's nice. It's Whispering Wizard. This is the 3 and a blue 3/2, which is kind of its downside, honestly. Again, uncommon. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying, and it only triggers once per turn. But this card's been really powerful. Like, yes, it is in blue and maybe not a great starting point, and the 2 toughness is like really annoying on this card because it dies to kind of everything. But man, I've been able to do some really cool stuff with this where I'm like, play a spell for cheap, get a 1/1, and then pass a turn, maybe counter something, get another 1/1, and you just feel like you're running away with it.
Yeah, I would, even despite not really wanting blue to be the place I start, I would take Whispering Wizard over the cards we have in this pack. Like, it is a strong card. It pushes you into blue-white or blue-red or blue-black. Really, any but the blue-green colors have a decent amount of spells going on with it.
And, picking it up pack 1, pick 1 means that you get to build around it as well. So there's a bump there. Next is another good blue card, Loom Egg. This is a 2 and a blue 0/4 defender. And when it ETBs, you scry 2. And when you sacrifice it, you return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And it becomes a 4/4 serpent that you can sack an island or something to give it unblockable until end of turn.
2 islands, but still a great card. Loom Egg is a really good build around. And this is, it's funny. It's like, even though the exploit deck's not really where I'd want to be, because the exploits hasn't worked out great, this is actually one of the stronger reasons to go in that direction. And you don't need that many exploit creatures for this card to be great.
Yeah.
Plus, every now and then your opponent casts, by invitation only, or like the Wrath, which is a sacrifice Wrath,
Yep.
or they play a Dreadtide Gargantuan and they don't realize that it's actually going to trigger your egg.
Yeah.
But wow, I think I would take it over the Wizard. I think this card, just when it works, is just very close to just being busted. A 3-mana 4/4 with Scry 2 that also gives you an exploit trigger is really, really good. And I would look to just pick up a couple exploit cards to go with it.
Yeah, I think, we haven't mentioned the rare, but outside of this, I think I would actually take Loom Egg here. I really like that card. Next is the rare. It's Howling Moon. This is the 2 and a green. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, target wolf or werewolf you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you get a 2/2 wolf.
I really haven't had much experience with this, but it hasn't been great when I've played against it.
No.
And I don't really pick it that highly. I could believe that this card could be good in some decks for sure. But this is not a card. It's been proven to me that it's good so far. So I don't know. I'm curious what if your experience is, what they've been with it, or if you have played against it and thought it was good.
I have played against it and I thought it was bad. And the reasoning is it just gave me too much agency over things, right? So there's a couple of things that you have to factor in. One is that this only gives your wolf or werewolf the +2/+2 on your turn. So it doesn't actually affect defense at all. So if you're behind, this doesn't really do anything. And then the other two things are that if I have removal, I can choose to use them on a wolf or a werewolf, which are often good targets anyway, assuming you don't have like every creature in your deck being that way. And then that makes this card almost nothing. It's pretty close to a 3-mana nothing. And then of course I have the ability to decide when, how to deploy my spells. And since this normally goes into red green doesn't have a whole lot of ways to stifle me from just saying, I'll just cast my spell on your turn. Like, if I have bleed dry or something, there's really nothing that I have to care about out of red green that's going to punish me. Right. And so I can just say, I'll, on your upkeep or go to your turn or even in combat or whatever, kill your creature. And so it just means that you don't get to realize the full potential of this card often enough, even if you have a decent amount of wolves. And to me, that just bumps it down to like not where I want to be.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably just take Loom Egg out of this pack. Not the most stunning packs, but you don't always open good packs.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard that there's bombs in this format. I've never opened one, but I assume there are. Actually, I have opened some, and I want to talk to you about that, Luis.
Yeah, I was going to say that's actually probably a good jumping in point. Last week we talked about the format, talked about where we're at on that. I kind of try to deliver, where I think, the format is and what our opinions are on it. I'm actually higher on the format now than I was a week ago. Last week I said I would give this a 4 out of 10. I actually would upgrade it to a 6 out of 10, which isn't bad.
Okay.
Here's kind of where I'm at. The more I've played, the more I've felt that the games where someone doesn't play one of these kind of dumb rares are actually pretty good, comparable to Midnight Hunt, which I thought had really good gameplay, and a format that I enjoy playing. And the knock on the format still is that like sometimes your opponent casts Alana and Alina or Dreadfeast Demon or whatever, and it's just like it kind of makes the rest of the game trivial. But I found the gameplay to be good. I actually like blood as a mechanic quite a bit. I found that the decks that rely on that to really play out nicely, and overall I've been just kind of impressed by how interactive and fun the games were. I mean, the LR versus LoL Showdown, our closest one yet, and like I said, we still haven't quite covered that, but the games were really good. They were really close. A lot of my games, and watched you and BK as well, really hinged on small decisions, and that was kind of the decider in some of those games. Is like, I chose to do this, or they chose to do that, or they left mana up for this, and I played around it, or they maybe missed an interaction on board that would have been good, or something like that. Just really small micro decisions, not huge punts, and that's actually the sign of a good format. That like little decisions matter, because if only big decisions matter, there are very few of those, and like those games can kind of feel on rails. This format doesn't feel like that. Yeah, I also do like how many of the color pairs are good. I do think that blue-green is particularly bad, and blue itself is like kind of weak, but all the red color pairs are good. White-black is good. Green-red is good. white red is fine. White blue is good. Like there's a lot of places to go. And I don't think that you need every color pair to be good, but it's nice when a lot of them are, so you don't feel like you can't take a certain color or card, pick one, pack one. Like we did both say we'd pick one, pack one, a blue card out of that pack.
Yeah.
Right. And, and probably the second best card in the pack was also blue, the Whispering Wizard. So I'm higher on the format. If you kind of didn't like it in the first couple weeks, maybe you want to give it another chance. I've found it to be pretty fun, but obviously, again, it's just our opinions. But I found myself playing a lot more drafts with this format than I expected to after the first week.
I have too, and one of the things I want to ask you about, because I've had a similar curve with the set as well, where I'm like, I keep going back to it, and I feel like there's still a little space here, and it's still kind of fun, and the games have been good, like you said, the gameplay, but I wonder how much of this is us directly comparing it to Midnight Hunt. Like the world is similar, right? I mean, it's set in the same universe or plane or whatever. And that, there's flavor considerations for that aren't really on our radar as much, but they certainly are like, hey, it's Innistrad. We have to do stuff that cares about graveyards. And, there's still going to be vampires and werewolves and flipping. And, they change Disturb a little bit, but, it's still, Creature Dies comes back as something. And I wonder how much of this, was us comparing it directly to what was a pretty good set with Midnight Hunt. It was flawed, but good. And I wonder if we just had Crimson Vow dropped on us. Let's just say it came out before Midnight Hunt. Let's just say this was the first set and Midnight Hunt was going to be later. We'd never touched it before. Do you think that we would have had the same initial reaction?
It's possible not. I mean, the closer something is, the more of a comparison you're going to draw. And of course, there's a lot of reasons to compare these two sets. They're even going to be combined in the double feature at some point, right? Mm-hmm. So,
and that's going to be where they're just mixed together. Is that right? Or
yeah. I'm not sure how I feel about all that, but we'll
figure
it out when it comes out.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of the same themes and, a lot of the similar mechanics or even same mechanics and all that. And kind of where that ends up is a more direct comparison. But I also think that like the bomb issue would have happened no matter what. Because, and I think that's the biggest knock on the format. It just is, right? Like if I could remove that, if I could make it so there were fewer cards that basically win the game on the spot, I think that the format would get multiple points added to it in terms of how much I enjoy it.
I did have a question, by the way, a bigger picture question that came up as a result of the bombs in Crimson Vow. I heard Ben S. say on his stream, he said he would prefer if rares and mythic rares just weren't draftable, like they just weren't in the packs at all, or you just weren't allowed to play them in limit, like you could take them or whatever. But basically, if they just weren't a factor, if all of limited was effectively commons and uncommons. And, I can understand that viewpoint to a point, because it's like, yes, I like flattening it down and kind of making people work with a little less. I think that's kind of part of the fun of limited is, figuring out how to make lemonade out of lemons. But, the rares do add an excitement. They do open up design space that isn't normally there to be extra complex and to do more things. Do you agree with his assessment? Would you, if you could, create a new type of booster pack that was, I know they're called draft boosters now, but let's just say they were really just for limited, like that's what they were for. Would you just get rid of all the rares and mythics?
Absolutely not. I hate the idea. I think it's incredibly bad.
It rubbed me wrong too, because I get excited about opening rares. It's just the broken ones that are dumb, right? Like this is solvable.
And even then, having some broken rares is fine. It's just it's once you get past a certain threshold, and I don't literally know the what that threshold is. Mm-hmm. But I know it's too high in Crimson Vow. Then it becomes obnoxious. But I so much of the fun of limited is getting to play with a sweet rare that you've never gotten to play with before, or gives you a new direction. I think that good rares. And by good, I don't just mean powerful. I mean cards that are fun to play or lead you in different directions, or in some cases are just really powerful and you get to play with them. That's fun too. Mm-hmm. Extend how many times you want to draft the set by quite a bit. And also, look, Ben can speak from his perspective. I don't think that he's incorrect in saying I would have more fun doing this. I think that the vast majority of people would not, though.
Yeah, I don't know what he said. I think he said limited would be better if. I don't know if he.
That's how.
Translating that for him.
It would be better for him, but
I'm saying I don't know if that's what he meant. Like, because sometimes people say, "Well, I would prefer." Like you and I do this all the time.
He meant it would be better for everyone. I'm sure. I've heard him talk about this.
But you're thinking
it would be better for everyone. I just disagree with that.
You just disagree.
I don't disagree that it would be better for him. Yeah. Not even just in terms of win rate. He would have more fun because, of course, he wants to have everyone have a deck full of 5 out of 10 level cards and battling it out and having only like very small decisions matter or whatever, or at least having those be the majority of things. I don't think that's how most people are wired. And also, you have to realize most people are going to draft the set just a couple times. It's fun for them to play an exciting rare. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think I would enjoy the sets less. I think the vast majority of people would enjoy the sets less if this was true. I understand the impetus here, and I think there is a balance. Like I do think that Crimson Vow has too many rares that do this, but that doesn't mean that I want 0 because I don't.
Yeah. The thing that I keep going to is this just feels like a solvable problem if you were only concerned with limited. These rares have to be good in other things like constructed formats, even Commander, stuff like that. So, they're trying to do too much with one product here, it seems. But at least from my perspective, it feels solvable if you wanted, right? It's usually nitpicks on some of the cards. 1 mana here or there makes a huge difference. And then the number one complaint easily from me, but also from you and people that listen to the show and stuff is if you can't interact with the creature, right? The Avabrook Caretaker has hexproof. It's like, come on, right? Like that card just completely dominates the board and you can't kill it. Like this isn't fun.
Yeah, or Dreadfeast Demon. If you don't literally have it right then, they have 2 now. And
same thing with Troxel, the Corrosive. It's the same. If you go to your end step, right? Like that's what you need to get to for both the Demon and Troxel is just you get an extra Demon or you're putting a bunch of counters and then it's over for the most part. I think you could make the argument for Helana and Alina partners as well that you need to get to your combat step, which is kind of ridiculous. But again, I don't think people complain as much if you can kill the rare, right? Like if it comes down, it's a big problem, but you manage your removal and you have enough removal to actually kill it, then, you're in business. But the problem comes in when you even did a good job of keeping your bleed dry in hand. Like you blocked a bunch and you used a combat trick and you were conservative and then your opponent plays something with hexproof and you're like, oh, none of it mattered, right? Like I even did the thing. And it didn't matter. I think that's the part where, you cross that line too many times and it makes the format unfun, even if these cards do come up infrequently.
I mean, I do think the frequency is just such a big part of it because there are busted rares in every format. Mm-hmm. Look at the last 5 formats. There were busted rares in all of those formats that had absurd win percentages. People weren't complaining about them really to the same degree at all because most of those formats, they didn't show up in nearly the same quantity.
Yes,
and to your interaction piece, yes, that's a very important piece. And part of it is if there's 25 busted rares in a format, some of them will not be interactable.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
That's just kind of like numbers. I think it's really hard to avoid that. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, speaking of busted rares, I wanted to give you the update on my MTG Las Vegas trip. I went down to play in the limited event and also hang out with Woody and Adam and bunch of people that I bumped into down there. Was kind of interesting. I opened, when you do the sealed, you open up your packs and the person across from you kind of verifies that like they can just get a view that you open these packs and these were roughly the cards that were in, and then you do the whole registration thing. But for me, I opened up my packs and I got a Dreadfeast Demon and I got a foiled Troxel. And I was like, wow, I actually did it, right? Because like that's the thing you're hoping for is just give me some bombs. I'll figure it out from there. Just give me some bombs. Now these ones were both black and both cost 7 mana, but I mean I'm like, hey, I'm super happy to have it. And then I also opened up another rare in red, and I can't remember the name, but it's the 4 red 6/6 with Menace. And whenever it does damage, you get blood
Olivia's
token. Attendance, yeah. And you can pay 2 in a red to ping something. So another bomb. Not quite on the level of those other 2 cards, but still a truly great card. And so I'm thinking, okay, red, black, perfect. Give me some nice removal. We'll bridge the gap. I'll land these bombs and we'll just take over. And unfortunately, I didn't have the removal. And that made my life very, very difficult. I just didn't have hard removal outside of an Abrade, and then the 4 and a red deals 4 and at sorcery speed. And so I was in a really tough position because I had to build towards the rares. That was obvious, but I did not have the option to build something that had a really good chance to get me to actually cast them. And so I started looking at my options, and I considered cutting red, which would lead me down the rare, down the Abrade, and down the, I keep forgetting what it's called, but
Lacerate Flesh.
Lacerate Flesh. Thank you. And then I would have really no removal, and I would also lose the attendance. So I looked at a couple other builds, and it turns out they were actually pretty good. I had green and blue that I could pair with my black that gave me a much better early game, mid game, but still did not shore up the removal problem outside of blue, which did have a couple of syncopates, which could do good work, but still aren't removal, right? And so I toyed around with the build for a while and decided that the 2 removal spells plus the extra bomb were worth it for red, and I would play it as such. And it was a pretty good build. But what I found really early was, for example, my first opponent was also red-black, and they played the vampire, the 5/6 flying trample vampire, and on 4, and it was like, look down at my hand, don't have an answer for it. I guess I'm dead. And I was. It was just, that was it. Right. I dug as hard as I could to try to find something, but there was nothing I could do, and I died to it. That happened both games. I also faced down Hana and Alina, and it was the same thing. In fact, that time I actually managed to kill the Hana and Alina. They cast it on 4, put 2 counters on a 2/1 flyer, so it became a 4/3 flyer. And then I untapped and killed Hana and Alina, and then just died to the 4/3 flyer because, again, didn't have quite enough removal. Now, the games that I won were when I was able to stabilize enough to land one of my 7 drops, and then it was over. I mean, those cards are so stupid. Troxel particularly is offensive, but I mean, the demon is almost as bad or as good in the case of me. And so I realized that after the first 4 rounds, and I was 2-2, that I had played, it was 2-0, 2-0, 2-0, and then a 2-1. And all but one of my games came down to me or my opponent casting an offensive bomb and winning as a result of it. And that was pretty bad. I'm going, okay, well, we've talked a lot about how bomb heavy the format is and stuff, but come on. Like, we played one game right out of 9 where it just sort of came down to like who could hang on the longest and who managed their stuff and who top decked a decent creature at the right time, and just sort of won through how you'd call like a normal game ending. All the other ones were Dreadfeast Demons, Troxels, or my opponent's 4 mana bombs killing me. And that was not great, right? That's not really, what you want for the format. Ultimately, I ended up finishing 3-3 on the first day, but you needed an X-2 record to make it to day 2, so I didn't make it. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I got lucky with the 2 bombs, but I didn't really have the tools to get myself to them consistently enough. And I didn't. Then I came back the next day, and me, Adam, and Woody played in a team trios event, which was really fun. This is where you open up 12 packs between 3 players, and you each get to make a deck, and then you play as a team, in the sense that you can talk to each other and stuff like that. Those are really the best way. I mean, seriously, the most fun way to play Magic is with 2 friends playing one of those. And we ended up going 2-1 in that. We lost in the last round. Got kind of smashed, actually, but it was really, really fun, too. So overall, pretty good trip. I ended up getting a migraine on one of the days, which really sucked. And it did feel a little weird, Luis. Like the lack of the sort of bigger competitive scene was very palpable for me. There was no coverage, so my coverage people weren't there outside of a couple that made the trip. Producer Jeff here on the show was there working for CFB, and I saw Dennis from CFB and BJ and stuff, but it wasn't the whole crew there or anything like that. So that felt a little bit weird. And then the whole vibe of the thing is just different when it's not, like leading into a set championship pro tour style event or anything like that. There's far fewer pros there, which is kind of the people that I'll talk to between rounds and catch up with and stuff. And there was a few, but there was far fewer than there would have been at a paper event before. And it feels a little bit more like a convention now, which is kind of cool. Like that's the direction that these things have been going for quite a while. And it feels like it's taken another step in that direction. So they're different, but I have to say, I got to give props to CFB for how they ran it. You know, it really felt like they ran a tight ship. You know, you had to be vaccinated or have a card that showed that you know, a recent card about, negative test for COVID or whatever. And like they had it set up online where you could get your vaccination card vetted ahead of time so that you didn't have to do it there, because they had to, you know, make sure it's real and do all that stuff. And then, and then everybody was wearing masks inside. You know, there was a few people that didn't, or that took them down for a while or whatever. I'm not really sure why, but it was very few. You know, I would say 99% were just wearing masks all the time. So, and there was also a lot more space than normal, which I got to say was really nice. You know, you're not shoulder to shoulder with people. And I recognize that's not the most efficient way, you know, to pack people in, but of course it was needed to have some space between people so that distancing can happen. And so that was really good. You know, I'm hoping that CFB did well with the event and wants to do more of them, you know, as we sort of start to normalize stuff after COVID. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to give my little tournament report there. We also had the showdown, Luis, just a couple days ago here between us and the Lords Limited guys. Yeah,
this was our closest showdown yet. We ended up taking it down barely. It came down to match 9, tied 4-4. Me and Ben, Mr. Metronome, in game 3. I ended up barely winning. Really close game. You know, he neglected to use Traveling Minister on his final turn and then didn't block. He would have, had he used it, he wouldn't have had to chump with it, but he didn't use it. Then he needed to chump a 4/4 with it. Ended up going to exactly 0 instead of 1, and you know, that was kind of unfortunate. But I think
what was your deck?
I was white green aggro.
Yeah.
But I think I was ahead in that spot, even if he chumps, and slightly less ahead if he just uses it on his turn. But either way, we ended up taking it down. So yeah, I drafted white-green aggro. My draft was interesting where from the beginning of the draft, I was white. I drafted like 3 or 4 white cards in a row. I took Markov Walters, the red-white card. I opened Olivia Pack 2 and just took it because I just couldn't pass it. And going into Pack 3, and I discussed this throughout the whole draft because, you know, we all stream them. I said, like, one of my strategies for a Crimson Vow, and this is true for any draft, not just team drafts, is I try to keep myself open. And if you can, it's much better to be in just one color rather than 2. So if at the end of pack 1, you've got mostly white cards or mostly black cards, what that does is if you open a bomb rare in another color, you can just take it. And that actually is what happened to me. I kept myself very open. I had like 2 black cards, 2 red cards, and all white cards. And then I opened Torin, Fist of the Heavens, the white-green Monastery Mentor guy.
Yeah.
The 1 green white 2/2 training. And then whenever you cast a creature, you get a 1/1 of training. I just slammed Torins, ended up being white with 3 green cards, the Hookhand Mariner, the Ripsaw Torins. And, you know, they all did really well for me. Like I said, this showdown was – I was a little worried this showdown was going to – feature someone opening like a ridiculous rare and steamrolling. That didn't really happen.
No.
Overall, like, yeah, there were a couple rares. I had Torrens, Tupperware had, you know, Olivia's Attendants. Like there were some good cards, but honestly, the games were just really good. We had very few of those like, hey, I just played a bomb games. I had one of those against, you know, Mr. Metronome where I just made 10 tokens off Torrens and obviously easily won. But for the most part, people just played good cards and, you know, ended up having these really close, tight decisions. So, yeah, I ended up going 2-1. You went 2-1, and BK went 1-2, and we edged them out 5-4. So we've got a lead in the showdowns, a pretty good lead. But they've been so close that, you know, everyone's still stoked to just continue to play them because they're just a lot of fun, something we all look forward to when the new set comes out. Yeah. And really just the competition is great. It's great to have an avenue for competition. And, you know, as close as these were, like someone actually tallied up all the match wins, and it's like 34-29 in our favor overall.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like we're up, 5-2 now?
We're up 5-2, but
it could so easily be flipped. Like it really could.
I mean, again, we're only ahead by 5 matches overall. Had we distributed our wins and losses differently, it could just be 4-3 or 3-4 or whatever. It wouldn't be hard for that to change a little.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for those guys, and I don't go in there assuming that we're going to win by any stretch. And I'm always really glad to have a Hall of Famer and a former full-time pro on my team as well to carry me. One thing I wanted to add to what you said about staying open, I did the same thing. I opened Magma Pummeler and then got past the Magma Pummeler, so I just kind of moved in hard on red. And I actually was able to stay open for quite a while. But, to add to your point, you said if you're open enough, you can open a rare and take it. But to even add to it, you can play it, right? Because it's team draft, you kind of have to take it anyway. Like if you open Troxel there, you're just like, well, I'm not going to pass it, so I have to take it. But now you've opened the door for you to actually put it into your deck as well, which is a huge bonus because, that goes from you taking a card and playing it, making your deck way better, to you having to effectively scrap a pick, just so that your opponents don't get it. That's awesome. I mean, that's such a huge jump for you. And I was really glad that we didn't have that. I don't think I ran a rare in my deck. I don't think I had even a single rare. You could, and I ended up being red green, by the way, but it was close. I was really heavily in red and just ended up being green as kind of the tiebreaker. And then the one other thing I wanted to talk about with regards to it, actually, there was 2 things. The first one is people should watch your game 3 against Metronome, the one where you played around Counterspell the whole time, because that was awesome. I watched it on my stream with my chat, so you can also watch that, if you want to see how I was viewing things. But this is a really good lesson about decisiveness. This is one thing that you'll see at top tier pros and then at really good players, sometimes not, where they understand what's going on, the tier down, but they often will not commit to a line of play or a line of thinking. They will fade or they will veer off of it, even though there hasn't been any information given to them that should make them do so. And Luis, really had a good read and a good idea that Metronome had Siphon
Essence, yeah.
Siphon Essence, the counter a creature or planeswalker and make a blood. And if you watch the way Luis played that, he stuck to that read. His read was A, it was correct, but B, he didn't receive any information that would make him think it was incorrect. And Metronome was really trying to get some value out of that card by countering something. And Luis just refused. He was like a dog with a bone. He's like, no, I'm not giving this up. I believe that you have this and I'm just going to punish you as many times as I can. Right. And I think a lot of people might have lost their patience or said, screw it. I'm just going to do this. And if you watch Luis play, he didn't do that. And, it actually ended up paying off for him pretty big too in terms of tempo, because we don't know Metronome's hand. I didn't go back and look, but he kept passing the turn, trying to leave mana up. And, Luis was able to develop his board without running into the counter spell. And, he could have made other choices that, that ran into that and it could have turned out a lot more poorly for him. So that's something that I think is definitely worth looking at. And now I can't remember the other thing I was going to say, Luis, but whatever. I'll remember it in a bit, and that was good enough for there. We have the trophy, right?
Yeah, yep. So if you didn't see on Twitter, Juan, the community manager for Channel Fireblade,
Juan is so insane. He's incredible.
Awesome. He also loves all these podcasts, and he super cool guy. He made a trophy that first of all, it has a giant bread on top, like a piece of bread. Because if the whole bombs removal evasion thing that we always make fun of, so it's got the bread on top, and then it has the trophy is the winner of each showdown engraved on it. So I actually now have to get the next one,
the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, like the little nameplate there.
Oh my god, that's great!
It's so funny. So yeah, I guess we got another notch on the trophy, and I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, so super cool. One thing that I wanted to touch on, you touched on it just a little bit with big picture though, is I wanted to talk about blood tokens because they've played out really well, right? They're not broken by any stretch. They're not. They're not cards, right? They're not clues or something like that completely fundamentally change things. But boy, any of these ways that they've got to make late game limited a little better by being able to get rid of lands. You know, we've always liked cycling, and, you know, the cards I often go back to are in Strixhaven were the dual lands that let you scry. Like, I just want those on every set now where you pay like a lot. It was 4 and tapped scry or whatever, but that helps, right? That's something to do if you start flooding out. These blood tokens have been a really elegant, nice way to do that. And then they capitalized on them by making cards that care about blood tokens themselves. So they add another layer to it. But boy, if we didn't call these blood and just called them, you know, whatever, ether token or something like that, just something more neutral, like, I wouldn't mind seeing these in a lot of sets.
Yeah, they play really well. They add a lot to these, like the micro decisions we're talking about, where you really get punished now if you play out a 6 land that your deck doesn't need.
Yes.
You know, you have to figure out when to crack the blood token. You have to figure out when, like, what you're kind of using it for when you have multiple things that use it. You know, sometimes you have like a Restless Bloodseeker, the 1/3 that flips to a 3/3 by sacking 2 blood tokens. Or you've got Sanguine Statuette, and you have to decide, okay, do I want to crack a blood token to get in for 3, but the card I'm discarding isn't one that I really want to discard. It's really close. It's a lot of cool decisions. I really like how they play, and the cards that generate them tend to be pretty good as a result.
Would you have them in other sets if they weren't like in a non-thematic, like same effect but not blood, but just call it whatever?
Charge token? I mean, I think that you could. Having them be called blood token makes it a little challenging to fit into other sets kind of randomly, but right. you could still flavor cards if you wanted to make them, like, you know, you can imagine a set that just has 2 different vampires that make blood tokens, and that wouldn't be incongruous if that set was going to have vampires anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm talking about too, just unshackling them from this and just calling them charge tokens or whatever, just some random magical word or whatever, and just putting them wherever you saw fit, sort of like how cycling is. Like, it can go into any color. You know, they can sort it out. I wouldn't hate it. I mean, maybe making these evergreen is too big of a step because they're not, I don't know, are they the best solution? I don't know, but I wouldn't hate it. Like, I feel like these sets have really benefited from just giving somebody, again, these aren't game breaking, right? Like, blood tokens aren't raw power, right? They're not the type of thing that says like, well, I've saved up five blood tokens. Now I get to draw 5 cards and the game's just completely over. Instead, you know, they're a way to manipulate the game in the late stages when you need something specific or when you've run out of gas. That's a limited resource, right? Like, you use it, it's gone. It's not like you could just keep doing it over and over again, but it also, leading up to that point, affects how you might want to play. And then I really like it because, you know, if you need to, sometimes you'll have a blood token on the first like 3 turns of the game and you need to hit a land drop, and you can be like, all right, this 6 drop's going away. I'm going to dig for my lands. And I mean, that to me is really sweet. Like, to be able to manipulate your library enough in a non-broken way. I think they really hit a sweet spot with these. So I'd love to see them come back just named differently so that they could fit into any set. Let's talk about the top 5 colors of commons in each color, Luis, because this is a good touch point to kind of, you know, you and I went through and worked these lists out before the show together, and it shows kind of where we're at and how we see these formats. So let's start with white. What's the 5th best common?
So 5th is a Fierce Retribution. Yeah. 6 mana kill any creature or 2 mana kill an attacking creature. It's
been good enough.
Yeah, it's been good enough. The main reason that I'm not super high on it, though I still think it's one of the top white commons. It's a great card, but compared to some of these other cards, is white ground-based aggressive decks have a little trouble using that, which does mean that white red and white green, it's not where you want to be. Though it's fantastic in white blue and white black.
White black, yeah.
So this is kind of like a pick one, pack one situation. These things move up or move down depending on where you're at, as they should. Next up, we've got Kindly Ancestor, the 3 mana 2/3 lifelink that comes back as an aura. Great card, even in aggressive decks. It's just so hard to race these because what will often happen is you will play this card, and if your opponent doesn't have a good blocker, they can't even really attack because it's not good to. Attacking with a 3/3 and getting attacked back by Kindly Ancestor is a net loss for the 3/3 person, right? Mm-hmm. You take 1 and they take 2. Mm-hmm. And then often you'll end up in a spot where you just go chump with Kindly Ancestor, untap, put the aura on like a flyer or a big creature, and attack. And I'm not only up 2 life from the chump block, but I also get to attack back. And you end up with like a really savage like turn of events. Plus, you can discard it to like a blood token or what have you, and just putting a lifelink ore on something. I actually one of the games I won against like Mr. Metronome is I played the Ripsaw on the turn he left up Siphon Essence, and then next turn I equipped it on a Kindly Ancestor, and just like that 5/6 lifelinker just kind of went to town.
Yeah, he ended up putting -2/-0 on it from a Binding Geist, but then you just still hit him like 5 more times with that card, and even though it wasn't like running away with the game, it very much kept you in it.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Drog Skull Infantry, the 2-mana 2/2 that flashes back as a +2/+2 aura for 4. Just a good 2-drop that provides value later.
Yeah.
Something.
And it also tends to fit a little more well-roundedly than the Ancestor.
Yeah. And then Sigarda's Imprisonment, the pacifism, which has played out really well.
We need to talk about that because we were down on it because of prior sets and stuff. But why is this one all of a sudden doing fine? Even though, the full 8 mana's a lot, the 3 mana works.
I think that's because the main reason is that exploit is just not that good or prevalent. So you don't play against people who are really taking advantage of it. And then white just needs, a good piece of removal that gets a blocker out of the way, which this does. Also, paying 5 to exile it and then get a blood token is something that means that you just don't run out of gas in the late game.
See, this is what I mean. Like, you just tack a blood token onto that, and it's totally a game changer. It really is.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about the number 1?
I think the number 1 is just, it's no contest, and it doesn't matter which of the decks you're in. Yes. It's Traveling Minister. 1 mana, 1/1 tap is a sorcery. Give a creature +1/+0 and gain a life. It just works on life gain themes. It works with training. It works in aggression. It just does it all. And it's just such a fantastic card. There's also like no limit to how many I'd want. So I'm super high on Traveling Minister, and it's a premium common for sure. They
also stuck the landing with the design, right? You can tell they put a little extra time, like they made it sorcery speed, that kind of stuff. That is the exact sweet spot for that card to be really good, but not like, okay, this is dumb, right? Like where it's like messing with combat all the time or doing any of that type of stuff. It also means that you have to make some decisions, right? Like you're going to tap it most of your turns. But there are some times like we saw in the showdown where it would be better to block with it, and you have to kind of make a choice there. And I like that too. Traveling Minister, best white common currently.
And just to look at the white decks that I like white blue and white black the most. I think those are the two like premier white archetypes, and then a white red, and then a white green. I like the least of the 4, but I still think it's fine.
Okay. What about blue?
I was going to say part of the strength of white is I think all 4 of its combinations are solid.
Yeah.
Like you can't really go wrong. And so early picking white cards, I think tends to be pretty good. And I think all of them except black white tend to be aggressive, and black white can be aggressive. I just don't think it universally is.
It's funny because white ends up being like the secondary color in most of the pairings, but it's very solid. Like it's a really good support color for all of those.
I think in white red and white green, it's the primary color, but I think it's secondary in white black and white blue.
I had it. So in my mind, I was thinking that it's the primary for white green, but not white red.
I think it'll depend on what you draft, but I feel like the white has all the best low drops, so you end up wanting to be heavier white in most of the aggressive.
Yeah. So I guess what I was meaning was more like not in number of cards, but just like the better cards are in red for the deck. Like you get a braid or whatever. You don't get anything like that at a white, that kind of thing. But yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, I haven't really thought it through about that level of detail. What about blue?
So blue, again, the weakest color, and we'll get to the combinations, but for number 5, Chill of the Grave, and the blue cards are also pretty close together, just like the other, other colors. Chill of the Grave is a solid like tempo play, and especially good with like Retriever Scob, where you play it and then play Chill of the Grave for 2 mana, and you can kind of get a good board presence going. Chill of the Grave buys you a lot of time offensively or defensively. Syncopate, though I think Syncopate and Siphon Essence are pretty close. I give the nod to Syncopate because you can play it on turn 2, which I think just means it opens the door for this being your 2-drop, which is quite strong.
Yeah, and then the question comes, so you get flexibility with that, and then on the other side, Exile versus Blood Token. Blood Token's better, I think, than Exile in this set, but the flexibility on Syncopate leads me to take it over Siphon Essence.
Then we got Scattered Thoughts, the card draw spell.
It's good.
It's kind of chunky, costs 4 mana, but it's good. I've had many games where it's like, wow, this is a close game. And then they cast Scattered Thoughts, and now I don't think I'm winning. That it's really hard to not have something good to play the turn after you cast Scattered Thoughts when you look at your top 4 and get the 2 best cards.
Also worth noting that, that part of the reason why this card is higher on the list is because of Syncopate and Siphon Essence being playable.
Yeah, getting to leave up mana for Scattered Thoughts, but also have a counterspell up is great.
Right.
Cruel Witness number 2. This is the 3/3 flyer for 4. Just a solid card. I've lost a lot of games where they just play a Cruel Witness, and I don't have a removal spell for it.
Yeah.
And it gets you a little bit of card selection. But our number 1 is kind of funny, Lantern Bearer, which, to be fair, we saw this card and wow, we think this card's pretty good, and it's just overperformed.
Yeah.
Lantern Bearer is the kind of card that it's like, they play it and you're like, okay, I'm going to get hit for 1 for a few turns, but at some point they'll chump with it. And then now any ground creature they have is all of a sudden could just take to the skies and just beat the crap out of you. So
totally.
I love powerful 1-drops. It's actually funny how when we first started the show, or when I first got on the show many, many years ago, we were cautioning you because with the 1-drops they tended to make were not good. Now it's 1-drops are fantastic, and you should play a lot of them because they just have
our first 2 colors or number 1 cards are 1-drop. Yeah, the fact that they kind of messed around with the design language on the Disturb cards, with Lantern Bearer giving +1/+1 rather than just flying is really a huge difference too. Great card,
definitely, and so.
I also, by the way, do like it as exploit fodder. I know the exploit deck hasn't become a staple, but it's another card that you can get out for cheap and don't mind putting in your yard. Yeah,
definitely. As for color combinations, and this is part of it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing where I think blue has a weaker suite of commons than the other colors, and blue doesn't combine that well with that many of the different cards or different colors. And it's kind of related to its commons being weak, but also just the themes of the set. As a result, the only blue archetype I really like to be in is blue-white. I think blue-red and blue-black are both fine. This set's relatively tight in terms of balance, where if you told me at the end of a draft, oh, you're blue-red, it's okay, cool. That's fine. But it doesn't mean your deck is great or terrible. It's fine. But going in, I would rather be blue-white than any of the other blue combos, and I actively don't want to be blue-green. That's the only one where I'm just no, I'm not signing up for blue-green.
Yeah, I have yet to play blue-green in the set.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And just it's probably my favorite color pair in Magic, so there you go. Yeah. So first black card?
Gluttonous Guest. This is the 1/4 for 3 that makes a blood and then gains you a life whenever you sack a blood. And the reason
this is a theme card for LR.
Oh yeah.
Don't invite us to your dinner party.
To be so good is that as a 1/4, it can really shut down aggro. If you watch game 1 of the showdown, against Alex Corticals, I went Hopeful Initiate into Thalia into a 3-drop, and his first play was Gluttonous Guest. He actually ends up winning that game.
Yeah, incredible.
Well, no, sorry. I ended up winning that game, but I got really lucky to do so. But it had nothing to do with the early aggro. It was a really late top deck Catilda or whatever. But Gluttonous Guest completely shut down my attacks. It does that while also giving you a blood token to enable your other cards, but also just giving you a decent amount of extra life over the turns. And I've been impressed with how Gluttonous Guest fits into all the decks. Even decks that are kind of aggressive, I tend to play Gluttonous Guest. It's just a good card.
The only thing I don't like about it is the artwork. Because while it's totally good artwork, as far as quality goes, it's just that is not a Gluttonous Guest. I'm sorry, no. Next,
and then we've got Blood Crazed Socialite. This is the 4-mana 3/3 menace that again gives you a blood token, and then when you attack, you can sack a blood token. It gets +2/+2, and
this card's just pushed.
It basically just attacks as a 5/5 every turn. It's not hard to generate blood tokens if that's what you're in for, and I have so far been really impressed with Blood Crazed Socialite.
It's a 4/4. It's a 4-mana 5/5 menace, a common. That's pushed. That's going to hit you really hard.
It's very good, and you do want to be a little bit on the aggressive side to make use of it, but I found it to be good at doing that. Yeah. Next up is the one that we initially kind of underrated. Pointed Discussion. This is the Tuna Black. Draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, make a blood token. it just has played out such that this is the way one of the ways Black gets extra cards, and extra cards in a format with blood is really nice. Just extra raw cards because you want just things to discard to blood. Also, the comparison with Sift, a fairly strong limited card is like, oh yeah, I guess this is a lot like Sift. Draw 3, discard 1. That's a lot of what this has got going on. Plus, it fuels your other blood stuff. So I like Point of Discussion a lot. Been impressed with the card.
Yep, same.
Then we got a Diagraph Scavenger, the 4 mana 2/3 Death Touch. When it ETBs, exile a card from a graveyard, and if it's a creature, you drain them for 2. Just a good card all around. It's always a pretty impactful board card. Draining for 2 is nice. A little bit of graveyard disruption that doesn't hurt. It's not the biggest deal, but just the package here is good in aggro or control or mid range, and that's kind of why these cards tend to perform well.
Yeah, and then of course number 1's Bleed Dry.
Yeah, no controversy there.
Best common in the set.
-13 exile. It just gets rid of basically all the bombs, gets rid of any creature you need, and even exiles. Overall, I think Black-Red's not only the best black combo, it's just the best color combo in the set. It's the one that I've had the most success with. I also like Black-White a lot. And then Black-Blue and Black-Green are actually not that great. They're draftable, but I don't think they're something I'm excited to be in, which is why I like red as the best color overall. Because I think red and black are comparable in terms of common strength, but red just goes well with every color, which I think is an advantage that it has over black. But definitely happy to start with a black card. Always a great place to be.
Yeah, I agree. And that's just a nice baked in way to get a little advantage is if you start with a card that's of comparable power to another card, but just automatically goes into more decks. Just means you're more likely to play it. What's the 5th best red common?
So Reckless Impulse, this is the 1 in a red. Light up the stage, exile your top 2 cards until your end of your next turn. You can play them. The way you want to play this card, it's not that complicated. I basically play it the first turn. I'm going to miss a land drop is kind of the shorthand. Because you don't want to play it before playing your land, because if you flip a land, you obviously want to play it. So that, and ideally you don't want to play it on turn 3, turn 5 or something is a lot better. So you end up with Reckless Impulse as a 2-mana draw 2, especially if you have a low curve, especially if you have, a lot of ways to just play your cards. And overall, I've been obviously quite impressed with Reckless Impulse, and I'll draft and play a bunch of them. So
yeah, do you feel like it changes power level based on your curve, in a big way?
I do.
Lower curves better for this type of card?
When you cast this on turn 4, right, you have 3 lands in play. You're going to miss your land drop. You cast Reckless Impulse, and you flip a land in a 2-drop, or you flip a 2-drop in a 3-drop or something, and then you have a land in hand, so you can play the 2. It's very different than if you flip a 5 and a 4, and you're just not getting both your cards out of it. Or you cast this, late in the game, and you can just play both cards immediately. There's a lot that goes into to Reckless Impulse being better. That said, I've played it in kind of high-ish curve decks and been okay, because sometimes you just flip a land on an expensive spell and you get both your cards or whatever.
Yeah, but I played it in my Sealed in Vegas.
Oh yeah, great card in Sealed.
Yeah, and I just had to be careful about it because exiling one of my 7-mana bombs, was I needed to accept that risk if I played it on a turn before, I could cast it the next turn or whatever. Wow, another 1-drop here at number 4.
Voldaren Epic here, one of the most improved cards from my initial take on the card. I think both of us were like, this doesn't look like it does enough. This is 1 mana 1/1, pings them for 1, makes a blood token, is a vampire. And just, again, it's a 1-mana card that just does it all. It just puts something on the board, gives you something to sack to your Dreadfeast Gargantua, or sorry, the Diagraph Gargantua. I don't remember the name, the 5/4.
Yeah.
Rotting or something like that. Yeah. I forgot to. And, ends up just being a card I actively want in almost all my decks. So really happy with Voldaren Epic here, and a card I actively try to pick up. Yep. And then next up, we've got Muldrifter, Falcon Wrath Celebrant.
Wow,
this is the form of Menace. ETB make two blood tokens.
Muldrifter, huh? All right.
I mean, if you look at the Voldaren Epic here and Falcon Wrath Celebrants, these cards initially didn't look that appealing, but it turns out blood tokens play well enough, and these cards play well enough that I think they're great. I think that Falcon Wrath Celebrants is awesome. I played basically as many as I can get, and it's also just a really big threat. It puts something significant on the board. They have to deal with it, and then usually your curve tops out at 5. This is a big reason why I don't put Pyre Spawn in my decks anymore. The 6-mana 6/4 that dies into deal 3 to everything, or to target creature.
You made me cut one of those from my Showdown deck.
Yeah, and the reason is, and you had Falcon Wrath Celebrants in your deck, right? I think you had one copy of that. And the reason is that Falcon Wrath Celebrants means that you want to stop at 5 and not play lands above 5. Because you want to discard them to all your blood tokens. And when you have multiple Celebrants in your deck, you just don't want 6-drops that make you do that. So
you can just keep every land above and plan on hitting some blood at some point.
And I mean, how many games of Limited have you played where it's like turn 10, your opponent's on 5 land and you're on 8 land and you're like, man, must be nice to draw 5 land all spells.
Seriously, yeah.
Falcon Wrath Celebrants makes you do that.
Yeah.
Because once you start cycling through these blood tokens, you find more ways to do that, and it ends up just completely going off. So I really like Falcon Wrath Celebrants. I think it's on par with the removal in terms of like, I really want them in my deck, but you got to take the removal over them. And, number 1 and number 2, I think, are Flame Blast Bolt and a Braid. And honestly, they're basically tied. I would take a Braid over Bolt just because it hits a wider range of stuff. But it's the sort of situation where if I had one, I'd probably lean towards taking the other when I had the option of both again, just because you'd rather have like a mix of them. They're just good, efficient removal spells. They take out the things you need to take out.
Yeah, they really do. A braid is on the short list of best cards in the set, in my mind. And Flame Blast Bolt, like you said, is effectively the same.
And when it comes to red, like I said, red black's the best combo, but I would play red with every combo. Like red white aggro, red green werewolves, red blue spells, red black blood. They're all good. So
is red white the worst of that bunch?
I think so, yeah.
Because red blue, I haven't really been able to make work either.
I think red white and red blue are comparable, which is they're kind of like tier 2 archetypes. Like tier 0 is red black. I think it's just the best. It's just the two best
and red
colors.
green's been really good for me too.
It's energized. Tier 1, I think, like if red black is tier 0 and nothing else is in that tier, tier 1 is like white black, blue white, and red green. And then like tier 2 is like white red, green white, and I think and blue red, and then the lowest tier is green black and blue green.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's talk about green then.
So for green, again, starting with Massive Might, this is a card that's overperformed, and I think we both like kind of the dimension it adds to your deck. It just gives you a 1-mana way to punch through when you need to late, while also winning fights. And the green decks tend to be board position decks, even if they're not always aggressive. And Massive Might just ends up being good enough in any of those decks.
Yep. And then our next one is our buddy the Hookan Mariner.
Oh yeah, just
for the reasons
strong
described.
4-drop.
Yep, just good 4-drop.
And then I've got Weaver of Blossoms. That's the 3-mana 2/3 that taps for a mana of any color, and it flips into a 3/4 that taps for 2 mana. It helps you accelerate to your more expensive stuff. The werewolves, this is funny, and we didn't see this in Midnight Hunt just because the werewolves mostly were just bad, but there are enough good werewolves that it also makes all of them better, because the more good werewolves you have, the more likely you are to want to pass the turn to flip them.
Yep.
Like, imagine your deck with 7 good werewolves. Once you get 2 in play, playing no spells on your turn to flip both your werewolves makes it more appealing, which kind of gives a boost to Hookhand Mariner and Weaver of Blossoms. You don't usually pass to flip these ones, but when you pass to flip your Ballista Watcher or your Halpak Outcast, then these kind of get to tag along for the ride. They do get improved by your other werewolves being good.
Yeah. This next one, man, we called this, right? We're just like, look, these cards have been good every time they've printed them in the past 5 sets or whatever, or 5 years.
Yeah, and, Flourishing Hunter. 6-mana 6/6. The one thing I wish is that you didn't describe it as a 6-mana 6/6 gain 6, because I know that you knew that it looks at your other creatures.
Yes.
But a bunch of people were like,
I know.
This doesn't look at this.
I know.
Like,
I just shouldn't have said that. Yes.
Yeah, you said it in an ambiguous enough way that it didn't work out. So,
I get my tax for not being very, very specific, but yeah.
But yes, it's a good card. And just the way the green decks play out, the only green deck where I don't like this is white green, because that's just like a low curve, mostly white aggro deck. But it's great in red green. It just helps you win these races easily. And it can be solid in like green black. And
it's also a wolf, by the way. Just that actually does come up occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah, that matters. And then, of course, number 1 is Wolf Strike, the bite card that if it's night, you get +2/+0, and just good removal spell. The creatures are of a good size that it works even if it's not night. And when it is night, you can really kind of get some good action going.
Yeah, and that card, sometimes a green removal spell ends up underperforming a little, but this one's been totally good. It is a clean removal spell in these green decks.
So the main reason I have green kind of low in the rankings is again, it's kind of like blue, where the commons are okay, better than blue, but not like great. And just the only green archetype I really like is red green.
Yeah.
I'm fine with white green, but green black and green blue I think are the two bottom barrel archetypes. So I'm just not that interested in playing green. You know, the combination of expensive creatures and blood tokens in green black is not a very good one. Flourishing Hunter is actually bad in your blood decks, right? Because you want to discard your 6th land, but you can't when your cards cost this much mana. So
exactly.
I would try to not first pick a green card if I could avoid it, but obviously, you know, you should still just generally take like cards that are enough, like better than the other cards in the pack. Like I'm not going to take Voldar and Epicure over Wolfstrike, I don't think. You know, I'm not quite that extreme.
Right. Same. Yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer because I felt like the two, like green black and green blue were actually the two most interesting archetypes. Like, you know, self-mill and stuff like that's always really interesting in these Innistrad sets, and if you can pull them off, those are the 3 colors that kind of comprise most of these self-mill graveyard centric decks. But they went kind of a weird direction with the toughness matters stuff on the green black. But if you don't have those specific cards that enable it, then you have a bunch of like kind of underpowered 1/4s or whatever, and that's just a disaster because the other decks can get through that, either fly over it or just smash through. And then the blue green just seems to have either a lack of synergy or power, or maybe both. They're just, if you just look at the set, there just aren't cards that pay you off for going that route outside of like that uncommon. And even that's not amazing. It's pretty good, but it's not amazing. And, yeah, I mean, the rate on the card's good, but you know, that's one card. Like you need 4 or 5, right? You look for cards that care about blood tokens, and you're going to find 4 or 5, right? At common and uncommon that'll actually pay you off for being in black red. You know, Luis's favorite, mine as well. The most successful decks I've had have been black red and black white, for me, and red green. Those are the 3 decks that I've had the best success with. But if you look at these blue green decks or even the black green decks, there just isn't the support. It's just not there. Like you can look through the cards and there's just not enough that cares about toughness, or not enough that cares about your graveyard or doing, you know, nonsense with that. And when they don't support a archetype like that, it's going to be at the bottom. And when the 2 worst archetypes share a color, that is not good news for that color. And in this case, that's going to be green. Okay, let's call it a show there, Luis. Good stuff getting all updated. We'll probably do some archetype deep dives in the next show or two to kind of show you, you know, maybe some of the lesser drafted ones or whatever, to show you how, if we have had success, what that actually looks like with these, and continue along our journey. It's always important to remember for draft sets is that they evolve, they change. You know, your first impression isn't always your last impression. In fact, it's usually different. We saw that with this set where we're kind of warming up to it and figuring out what's good, what's not, what we like about it, not just focusing on the bomb heavy nature of it. And that happened in Midnight Hunt as well, you know, where we were kind of like pretty nervous that blue black was going to dominate to such an extent that it may make the format less replayable for us. And eventually the people adjusted, and that didn't end up being the case. So, you know, you don't want to get too stuck on any one opinion early. It's totally fine to have your opinion about it and to kind of mark it, but it does change over time. And that seems to be what's happening with Crimson Vow as well. So we'll keep you up to date on that as we move forward through the format. That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the show over at lrcast.com, including all the episodes of the show, etc. We want to thank our sponsors, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for Black Friday if you happen to hear this the day it came out. But if not, hey, you still got some Christmas shopping, some holiday stuff that you want to pick up. Channel Fireball is a great place to go for anything Magic related. And even beyond that, you know, if you're into Flesh and Blood or Pokemon, there's a bunch of stuff there as well that you can find and buy for your friends or loved ones. If you do pick up something, again, the affiliate code is LR, and it lets them know that we're the ones that sent you over, and they give us a kickback on it. We really appreciate you using that. Show's also brought to you by FTX. That's FTX.us here in the United States, and outside is FTX.com. And this is a safe, regulated way to manage your digital assets. If you're looking to jump into cryptocurrency or NFTs or anything in that space, FTX is the place to go for that. And we highly recommend you check them out. Again, just a reminder, though, this is a form of investment, and that means that you need to understand the risks associated with it, and that means you need to talk to an investment professional before jumping in. So make sure you do that. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
So I wanted to give folks a slight update on the Wheel of Time series. You know, a lot of people know that the Wheel of Time is one of my
That's just a little update here, huh?
Oh yeah.
Come on. What am I getting? Are you giving me a cut here, or how is this working?
A cut for what? I'm just saying that I started watching the show, and well, what Marshall's joking about is I also got sponsored to tweet about the show, but like this show's going to go up after that's already done. I'm not getting anything for this. The reason I actually am doing this is because The Wheel of Time has long been my favorite book series. I've talked about it on stream hundreds of times.
This is a Brandon Sanderson.
He finished the series.
He finished the series. Okay, because I know he's been in your stream a bunch, and he plays Commander and stuff. Yes.
So Robert Jordan was the author of The Wheel of Time. It's the series that literally got me into really loving fantasy.
Okay.
And, you know, I found it in my school library in high school. And then it was taking it's such a long series that at some point Robert Jordan actually passed away, but they knew he was going to, I believe it was like cancer or something like that.
Okay.
And him and his wife tapped Brandon Sanderson to finish the series, like with Robert Jordan's notes. I obviously Brandon contributed a ton of his own like perspective and his style and all that, but it's also, he was writing kind of like to try to keep the spirit of the series the way Robert Jordan would have, right? Like it's kind of a tricky thing to balance, right?
Really hard, but what an honor too.
Oh, he pulled it off completely. Actually, his books are my favorite of the books.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's impressive.
But so you know, when I found out that they were going to do an Amazon show of it, a TV series, I was like really excited. Obviously, like I knew that it might not be good, right? Like that it's possible that it would end up just not being a good representation or whatever. But
we've all had that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. But I want to say that I do I've watched the first 3 episodes right now, and they each get better. The first is, I think, not great, but it gets better over the next 2, just because the first tried to cram too much stuff into the first one. They got a smaller season than they were kind of anticipating.
Oh, that's really tough. Yeah.
And so they're trying to like catch you up because it's a long series. It's epic. You know, it's got a lot going on. But the complaint that a lot of people have is that they changed some stuff from the books, and it's like, yeah, of course they did. That's how this works. The goal is not let's exactly translate the books to TV. First of all, that's not feasible for some stuff, right? Things that can happen in books can't happen on TV shows. Second, I don't know. I think most people who direct and produce and write for these things want to inject some amount of their own expertise and judgment and creativity into them.
Yeah.
And you can argue that maybe they shouldn't, but I don't think that's true. I actually think it's better for them to make their judgment. If you've done a good job picking people to make your show, then you should let them do what they need to do, what they feel is right. And I don't mind that there's some things that are different. It doesn't take it away from me. My goal, or my hope of this is not, let's just watch the books play out on screen with people, because I don't think that that's necessarily the best story. And so far, I've liked what they've done. I think the changes are fine, and the dialogue is good. It's kind of snappy. There's some kind of a little bit more, kind of like aggressive dialogue that wasn't in the books. And I think I think that's totally fine. And so far, I've liked their casting. So yeah, I've liked the show. If you like the Wheel of Time, 100% check out the show. If you know nothing about the Wheel of Time, I would check out the show if you like fantasy shows. If you don't like fantasy shows, I don't, it's not something that you have to watch. Like, obviously you can check it out. There's not a huge opportunity cost to watching a couple episodes of TV. But
even people that weren't super into fantasy still liked Game of Thrones, right?
Right. Game of Thrones, I mean, setting aside the last 2 seasons, Game of Thrones, the first couple seasons, the first 4 seasons or whatever, were some of the best TV that I've ever seen. And and everyone loved it, even people who didn't know what Game of Thrones was or like fantasy. And I would recommend people to do that. Of course, they somehow destroyed that whole legacy, brand, everything so badly by making such a bad last couple seasons. It's really kind of a tragedy.
It was brutal,
But I have not gotten that vibe from it yet, where it's just like, you got to drop everything and watch this. But I think if you like if you like Wheel of Time, definitely watch it. I think it's great. If you like fantasy, definitely check it out. If you don't like either of those things or don't know about either of those things, definitely you can take a look. But I don't think that you have to, but it's also kind of cool. I don't know, if you like epic fantasy, then I think it's a great place to be, and it's a cool show. So I've been enjoying it so far, and well, that is not because they pay me to tweet about it, even though they also do that. But no, I mean, I legitimately do love this thing. It's been well established.